Well, hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Star Wars Jedi Outpost. Today is Friday, April 1st, and on this episode, I am going to be giving you guys my thoughts on Star Wars Rebels Season 1 and 2, and also get into some spoilers about where I think the show could be heading. So before I get into Rebels, I want to quickly give you guys a little history of how I got into this show. So getting right into it, I am not a fan of the prequel films at all. I liked them okay when I was younger. I thought some of the things they did in the films were really cool. But as I grew older and older, the more and more problems I saw with those films. And as an adult now, I can easily tell you that the prequel Star Wars films are kind of garbage. You know, the acting is horrible. I think some of the stories they were trying to tell was really cool, but the acting is so bad. The dialogue is horrific. A lot of the actors seemed like they were just sleepwalking their way through the films. And a lot of the special effects, you know, at the time, they seemed like they were revolutionary, but if you go back and watch the prequels today, they don't look very good. They haven't aged very well. And to me, as a fan, it seemed like what they were doing with the prequel films is they were trying to gear those films more towards kids rather than, you know, the adults that grew up with those kind of movies. So many years ago, when I found out they were doing a Clone Wars television show that would expand upon, you know, the prequel films, I wasn't interested in that at all. It just never interested me. I thought it was interesting, though, how they were going to be expanding what the Clone Wars was, and the show was going to be like a bridge between Episode 2 and Episode 3, showing what the Clone Wars was. I thought that was an interesting idea, but what ended up happening for me is I still have that horrible taste in my mouth of how bad those prequel movies are, so I actually never got into the show because I didn't want to see more of that time period, because it was something that I just kind of, at that point in my life, I just loathed that time period. I didn't like it at all. So what ended up happening is about a couple years ago, I actually started watching the Clone Wars TV show. They have them all available now on Netflix. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to give it a try. I'm a big Star Wars fan. I'll judge it for myself, which is what everyone should do with any movie they see. And I gave it a try. I watched all 6 seasons. I binged them all. And I liked some of the things they did in the Clone Wars. Don't get me wrong. I thought the character of Ahsoka Tano was really cool. Even though she kind of was annoying in the beginning, she really grew on me, and she became one of my favorite characters out of the Clone Wars TV show. I also liked how they retconned the death and resurrection of Darth Maul. You know, that's one of the things that all the fans were saying was one of the biggest mistakes of the prequel films, was killing off Darth Maul, who I consider to be one of the greatest Star Wars villains of all time. Not quite as good as Darth Vader, but he's right up there. Darth Maul is so awesome, and it was just a travesty that he killed him off way too soon in those films. So I liked how they brought him back. I liked how they explained it. I liked the whole dynamic of Darth Maul and his brother, and how basically the Sith betrayed Darth Maul. I thought all that stuff was really cool. I liked how they explain why certain Jedi could disappear after they died, and they go into all that, because that was one of the biggest questions that I think a lot of people had from the original trilogy of Star Wars films. It's like, well, how come Obi-Wan Kenobi and how come Yoda, when they died, they disappeared, but Darth Vader didn't die, and when Qui-Gon died, he didn't disappear when he died. So they go into all that in the Clone Wars, and how, you know, they explain how, you know, these characters have to basically learn how to do that before they die. And so I thought that was really cool. But other than that, and other than a couple of other like really interesting characters, like I love Captain Rex, but other than that, I really did not connect with the Clone Wars TV show that much. I didn't like a lot of the voice acting. I didn't like the guy whoever played Yoda's voice. I found it to be really distracting. I wasn't a big fan on the animation style of the show. I mean, I thought some of it looked kind of cool, but for me, it just didn't hit what I was expecting of that show. I did, so there were elements of the show I liked, but I have to say I wasn't a big fan of the Clone Wars show. I thought it started off really well. I thought, the Darth Maul stuff and the Ahsoka stuff was really interesting. But other than that, the Clone Wars show just didn't really do anything for me. So, in saying that, when I found out about Star Wars Rebels, after Disney bought Lucasfilm, and I heard that they were going to be doing a Star Wars show that was supposed to be like a prequel to A New Hope, and it was supposed to be about 5 years before A New Hope started, and they said this was going to follow a small kind of cell of rebels who basically are the ones that start the rebellion. I thought that premise was really interesting, but I still, again, I didn't like what I saw in the prequels. I didn't like a whole lot of what I saw in the Clone Wars. So I decided that, I'm probably just going to skip the Disney kiddie Star Wars stuff because I just have no interest in that kind of storytelling that Star Wars was doing. I'm more of the films guy. So I ended up skipping Star Wars Rebels Season 1 and Season 2. And what ended up happening is after The Force Awakens came out, that movie for me was everything I was hoping it would be. It was everything I wanted. It not only touched on the magic of the original Star Wars films, but it also gave us something new, refreshing, and different. So at that point, I was totally into Star Wars. I was trying to get into all the new canon stuff. I read some of the books. I read Aftermath, which I absolutely hated. But then again, I read Lost Stars, which I consider to be one of my all-time favorite books. I absolutely loved Lost Stars. I've read some of the comics. I really wanted to immerse myself back into this new canonized world of Star Wars. And if you guys have seen a show, there's a show out there called Collider Jedi Council, which is on Collider, and it's run by Mark Ellis, Christian Harloff, and John Campea. Anyway, they are the guys that really go into a lot of the Star Wars stuff. I get all my Star Wars news from them. I also go to Star Wars Newsnet and get a lot of stories from them. And one of the things that happened within this last year is everyone that I heard of, everyone in the movie and blogging sphere, they all were talking about how amazing Star Wars Rebels is. And it's something that started piquing my interest a little bit more about the show, but I still wasn't ready to start diving into watching the show. I still had a lot of those apprehensions. But what ended up happening for me is a couple months ago, they released a mid-season trailer for Star Wars Rebels. And if you've seen the trailer, you know what I'm talking about. It is one of the most epic trailers that I honestly ever can remember seeing in the last 5 years. Even more epic than the Force Awakens trailer. I thought it was even more epic than the Batman v Superman trailer that came out, about a year ago. This trailer had me sold and hooked on this show. So I decided, I just about a week or two ago, they had the season finale coming up. So I decided I'm going to give this show a try. I ended up getting both seasons on iTunes. They both have season passes for Star Wars Rebels Season 1 and 2. And I basically just was going to binge watch all the episodes that led right up to the Season 2 finale, which was Twilight of the Apprentice. And it was a two-parter. But before I get into all that, I got to say that from the very beginning, I was completely hooked and sold on this show. The very first episode, I believe, was called A Spark of Rebellion, which we are introduced to, Kanan. We're introduced to Ezra, Hera, Sabine, Zeb, and Chopper. And for whatever reason, this show really captured the magic of the original trilogy of films. It did exactly what The Force Awakens did. It brought me back into the Star Wars universe. The show was really fun. The animation is, I think it's, besides some of the way the characters look, they look kind of cartoony, but other than the characters, the animation is amazing. The space battles look almost like they're directly from the original films. They are awesome. So the show really captured the magic of what made me love Star Wars in the first place. And it had that kind of fun vibe. The show is for kids, but I think that the way they did the show was meant to be for both kids and adults, which I really liked. They didn't just kind of market this show just for the kiddies. This is a show that went to places that, they never even attempted to do in the Clone Wars show. And for whatever reason, I was automatically hooked into the show from the beginning. And you got to give props to Dave Filoni for, really expanding the Star Wars universe. I thought it was a really interesting idea. If you've seen the show, you know that a lot of the characters from the Clone Wars end up in Star Wars Rebels. The big one, which was the reveal of Ahsoka Tano. She was, in my opinion, she was one of the best things that came out of the Clone Wars show. Even though I, wasn't quite on board with her character at the beginning of Clone Wars, she became one of my all-time favorite characters. And now she's back in Star Wars Rebels. There's more story to tell with her character. And I loved the introduction of the Inquisitors. I thought the Inquisitors were something extremely terrifying. And I loved how they did all the lightsaber fights. I liked how the Inquisitors had the double-bladed lightsabers that kind of spun. I'll get into more of the spinning lightsabers when I get more into the season 2 finale. But I thought it was something that we haven't really seen from lightsaber before. I thought it was really interesting. I like how they revealed that the Inquisitors were at one time Jedi Temple guards, and that who eventually turned to the dark side. I thought that was really intriguing to me. And the other thing that I really like about Star Wars Rebels is the fact that the original trilogy characters appear in this show, and for the most part, they are all voiced by the people that played those original trilogy characters. Like Yoda appears in season 2 and is voiced by Frank Oz, not some other guy that's trying to do an imitation of Yoda. It's Frank Oz who's doing Yoda's voice. I believe Princess Leia appears in one of the episodes in season 2. She is in the episode, but it's not voiced by Carrie Fisher. But Lando appears in, I believe it's season 1, and he is voiced by Billy D. Williams, who did the original voice. Darth Vader is one of the main villains of the show, and he's, again, voiced by James Earl Jones, who always has done Darth Vader's voice. And I think by allowing those original actors to come back and voice the same characters but younger and in an animated show, I thought that was really special. For me, it was, at least. And it really brought me back into the Star Wars universe, and it gave a lot more validation for this show other than the Clone Wars show. So I gotta say that someone like myself who is very, very skeptical of Star Wars Rebels, I'm happy to say that this show really was incredible. Both seasons 1 and 2. I think season 2 might have been a little better than season 2. I really don't know. Actually, now that I think about it, I think season 1 was better, but I think some of the episodes in season 2 surpassed even some of the best moments in season 1. The issue I really had with season 2 is I thought it started on a really great trajectory. I loved the 45-minute film at the beginning called The Siege of Lothal, where they introduced Vader doing his lightsaber fight with Kanan and Ezra. That was incredible. That was such a powerful lightsaber fight. It had a lot of emotion to it. It was action-packed. You see Vader in his prime. he is not fucking around. He will kill you. He doesn't care. He is extremely strong with the Force, and he is brutal. And you see that in this episode. So season 2 started off really strong, and I thought they had a number of episodes that were just amazing. And then, for whatever reason, the show kind of dipped for me. They had a lot of filler episodes that, I don't know, they just seemed kind of pointless. Like, the one episode I really hated was an episode called The Forgotten Droid, where they kind of follow Chopper when he's going on this, like, secret mission and trying to find this, new base for the rebellion, which, that's kind of important for the story, but at the same time, the episode it didn't really do anything for me. It just seemed like it was too much of a filler. And what they should have done is they should have had that episode play somewhere at the beginning of the season, because when you have all these amazing episodes and then you just have this kind of drop off episode that's a filler right before you get to the season finale, it kind of interrupted the flow of the story for me, and I just found myself really despising that episode. But other than that, and a couple other episodes that were just kind of take it or leave it, season 2 was incredible. They really upped their game from season 1. The action, I thought, in season 2 delivered. The lightsaber fights, I thought, were more intense. I loved the training of Ezra with Kanan. I thought that was really cool. The scene that was almost a jaw dropper for me was, I can't remember what episode it was, but Kanan and Ezra are fighting these 2 new Inquisitors that had been introduced in the show, and they are just kind of getting their asses handed to them. They are not doing well. And then you see these hangar bay doors open, and you see, kind of silhouetted in the background, you see kind of the horns of Ahsoka's head, and she's coming right away, and that's how they introduced her character. That was such an incredible moment when Ahsoka comes in and just basically she just destroys those Inquisitors. She owns them. And actually, the more I think about it, they introduced Ahsoka at the end of season 1, but that was really all you saw of Ahsoka. And then in this season 2, is when you really start to see Ahsoka, using her lightsabers and fighting. Even though she's not a Jedi anymore, she still practices the Force, and she still is a Force user. But I thought that was really a really cool way to, have her arc kind of be slowly introduced in the show. So I thought that was really neat. Okay, so now I'm going to get into a lot of the last 2 episodes, or it was just basically one really long episode. It was Twilight of the Apprentice, parts 1 and 2. I've been looking forward to talking about this episode with you guys. This episode is some of the best Star Wars moments that I've ever seen in any of the Star Wars films. The material they put in these 2 episodes was incredible. They introduce, the planet Malachor, which is the homeworld planet of the Sith, and Ahsoka, Kanan, and Ezra go to this planet to basically learn how they can defeat these Inquisitors. And when they go to Malachor, they find that on the planet, they go into this old Sith temple. And awaiting them are the Inquisitors. So there's epic battles going on at the Sith temple. There's also the introduction of a guy called Old Master. And we find out that Old Master is, in fact, Darth Maul. He's back in the show. He's manipulating Ezra, and he allows Ezra to get one of these things called a holocron. And while that's going on, you see Ahsoka and Kanan fighting these Inquisitors, and then Darth Maul ends up turning on them, and he ends up blinding Kanan. I mean, this episode was so packed of action. It was so incredible to watch, and then that Darth Vader is coming. You saw it in the trailer. That the whole season has been building up to this moment when we finally see that Ahsoka is going to be coming face to face with her master, which is Vader. Now, remember, the last time we saw Ahsoka and Anakin together was, during the Clone Wars, and, Ahsoka went on her own way, and Anakin went on his, and, Anakin is now Darth Vader. And actually, going back a little bit, one of the best moments in Season 2 for me was when Ahsoka is having a moment of meditation, and she starts hearing Anakin's voice talk to her through a Force vision. And Anakin says, "Ahsoka, why did you leave me?" And then, she says, "I had to." And Anakin says, "Do you know what I have become?" And she sees Darth Vader silhouetted in the background, and you hear that mechanized breathing, and Ahsoka starts crying. She can't believe that this guy that she knew, her master, who was such a loving human being, could turn to the dark side. It was really heartbreaking to watch. And, you finally see Ahsoka and Vader coming face to face in the epic showdown of good versus evil. It was just so exciting to watch, and it was built incredibly well. It had a lot of tension, a lot of suspense. And what I thought was really, really interesting was there's a moment where Ahsoka slices half of Vader's mask off, and you see his kind of deformed face, and you see like his skull and how it's like broken up into tiny pieces. And what was really cool is they had that sound effect of Vader breathing. It sounded like his breathing when he was dying in Return of the Jedi, and that was really, really interesting to see. And it was just a nice throwback to Return of the Jedi, and Ahsoka finally realizes in that moment that Vader is Anakin. There was also a nice little nod to The Force Awakens. We see Ezra, who finds a crossguard saber, and it was kind of just a nice tip of the hat to, Kylo Ren's lightsaber from The Force Awakens, but we actually realized that lightsaber is actually a relic of the Old Republic. That's what the lightsabers used to be like thousands and thousands of years ago. And so that kind of fills in some of the history on why Kylo Ren has a crossguard saber, because Kylo Ren is a collector of Jedi and Sith artifacts, and that crossguard saber is an artifact. That's why Kylo Ren basically constructed his lightsaber to look like more of the Old Republic sabers, because Kylo Ren he's like a history student. And I thought that was just a nice little tip of the hat to the Old Republic. We also know that that Sith temple that they're in, you see all those dead, burnt bodies kind of all lying around, and they said there was a battle here long ago that took place between Sith and Jedi. So that's also another tip of the hat to the Old Republic. I think they're slowly starting to introduce audiences to the Old Republic storyline, and I think eventually in a couple years we're going to get an Old Republic, either an Old Republic movie or an Old Republic spin-off series or Netflix series, but I'm really excited for that. I think that could be really cool, but it was just a nice tip of the hat to maybe what is to come. So the end of the season was kind of left a little bit ambiguous. We see Ahsoka fight Vader, but we see Vader walk off, and he's kind of, weary from this lightsaber fight. He doesn't walk away unscarred because half of his mask is gone. And then we see, Kanan and Ezra going their own way. Darth Maul goes his own way. And we don't really see what happens to Ahsoka. Her fate is left kind of unanswered. And I actually, at first when I saw it, I was kind of disappointed, because I thought what a great way to end the season would be to have her killed off in an epic way. But the more I think about it, I think they did that for a reason. I think there is more story to tell with Ahsoka, and I think they have a plan on where she's going to fit into this larger Star Wars universe. So as much as I was disappointed with the way they left Ahsoka's fate, I'm not completely ruling out the possibility that there's a lot more story to tell with Ahsoka, and I think that the ideas that Dave Filoni and Leland Chee have in mind are going to go beyond Star Wars Rebels, and you may end up seeing her maybe in a future film or maybe in another animated series. I just found out that Ahsoka is getting her own novel that I believe is coming out sometime at the end of the year, so that might be, interesting to read about. They are teasing that next season Darth Maul is going to be the primary antagonist of the show, and I would love to see where they go with Darth Maul's story. I think the way they're setting it up is, Ezra has that holocron, and you see the redness in his eyes, so I think Ezra is turning bad. It's only a matter of when, but I think Ezra is going to be turning to the dark side here very shortly, and I don't know. There's a lot of theories going around that Ezra is Snoke, and there's all these other weird theories going around that what they're doing in Star Wars Rebels is not only going to overlap with Star Wars Rogue One, but that it's also going to tie right into The Force Awakens and the Knights of Ren. But this is all just theories and speculation, and a lot of times those theories and speculation just, they never come true. So I'm not going to get into all the theory stuff because, we just don't know where they're going with the show. The writers do. But I think it will be really interesting to see where we go next season. Star Wars Rogue One is coming out in December, and they're already going to be, well into season 3 by the time Rogue One comes out. So it'll be interesting to see if some of the characters from Star Wars Rebels show up in Rogue One. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I think you guys should be too. If you haven't seen Star Wars Rebels, you probably should not have been listening to this podcast because I went into a lot of spoilers, but overall, my opinions on Star Wars Rebels Season 1 and 2, they were fantastic. They were completely and tonally different from the Clone Wars. This feels more like Star Wars. It's closer to the original films and what The Force Awakens did. It's going to tie everything in together perfectly. The action was amazing. The voice cast was good. The animation was great. I give Star Wars Rebels 2 definite thumbs up. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Binge it. Get the season pass. Get them on Blu-ray. Star Wars Rebels is fantastic, and it's the definitive TV show for Star Wars fans. So go out and watch it. Anyway, that'll do it for me today. I hope you guys liked Rebels as much as I did. I cannot wait for Season 3 to start. If you want to hear more about Star Wars, then check out more of our Star Wars material here on this YouTube channel. And also make sure you check out our website, filmschoolhooligans.com. And as always, may the Force be with you.